There were 50 other incidents related to rip currents yesterday in Miami Beach and more. 6 more dolphins were found dead over the weekend on New Jersey beaches. That brings the total number to 52 since the beginning of July. Officials are concerned by the number of dolphins who have washed ashore, some of whom are decomposing. Officials are investigating the entire eastern seaboard to discover possible causes, including disease, environmental changes, and human activity. And that's a brief rundown of what's going on in the world of news. Again, we'll have a more up-to-date report from CBS Radio coming up in a matter of minutes. All right. In the meantime, we're going to check in with the White House and listen to this week's address by the President of the United States on this edition of First Cup.
Hi, everybody. Over the past few weeks, I've been visiting with Americans across the country to talk about what we need to do to secure a better bargain for the middle class. We need to rebuild an economy that rewards hard work and responsibility. An economy built firmly on the cornerstones of middle-class life. Good jobs, a good education, a home of your own, a secure retirement, and quality, affordable health care that's there when you need it. Right now, we're well on our way to fully implementing the Affordable Care Act. In the next few months, we'll reach a couple of milestones with real meaning for millions of Americans. If you're one of the 85% of Americans who already have insurance, you've already got new benefits and protections under this law that you didn't have before. Free checkups, mammograms and contraceptive care, discounted prescription medicine on Medicare, the fact that you can stay on your parents' plan until you turn 26, and much, much more. And it's okay if you're not a fan of the Affordable Care Act. You can take advantage of these things anyway. If you don't have insurance, beginning on October 1st, private plans will actually compete for your business. You can comparison shop in an online marketplace just like you would for cell phone plans or plane tickets. You may be eligible for new tax credits to help you afford the plan that's right for you. And if you're among the up to half of all Americans who've been sick or have a pre-existing condition, this law means that beginning January 1st, insurance companies have to cover you. And they can't use your medical history to charge you more than anybody else. You can find out more about the law and how to sign up to buy your own coverage right now at healthcare.gov. Tell your friends and neighbors without insurance about it too. And tell your kids that there's a new, easy way to buy affordable plans specifically tailored to young people. Many members of Congress in both parties are working hard to inform their constituents about these benefits, protections, and affordable plans. But there's also a group of Republicans in Congress working hard to confuse people and making empty promises that they'll either shut down the health care law or, if they don't get their way, they'll shut down the government. Think about that. They're actually having a debate between hurting Americans who will no longer be denied affordable health care just because they've been sick and harming the economy and millions of Americans in the process. And many Republicans are more concerned with how badly this debate will hurt them politically than they are with how badly it'll hurt the country. A lot of Republicans seem to believe that if they can gum up the works and make this law fail, they'll somehow be sticking it to me. But they just be sticking it to you. Some even say that if you call their office with questions about the law, they'll refuse to help. Call me old-fashioned, but that's lousy constituent service, and it's not what you deserve. Your health insurance isn't something to play politics with. Our economy isn't something to play politics with. This is not a game. It's about the economic security of millions of families. See, in the states where governors and legislatures and insurers are working together to implement this law properly, states like California, New York, Colorado, and Maryland, competition and consumer choice are actually making insurance affordable. So I'm going to keep doing everything in my power to make sure this law works as it's supposed to. Because in the United States of America, health insurance isn't a privilege, it's your right. And we're going to keep it that way. Thanks, and have a great weekend.
It's time for market information on First Cup. And the stock market edged lower Friday afternoon, hurt by weak performances from retailers. As a matter of fact, the Standard & Poor's, or S&P's 500 index, was down 6 points, or 0.4%, to 1,654. The Dow Jones Industrials average fell 38 points to 15,077. The Nasdaq Composite eased 1 point to 3,604. Shares of Nordstrom Inc., Macy's Inc., and JCPenney Company fell because of worries that U.S. shoppers might be pulling back on spending. A bleak outlook from Nordstrom late Thursday followed similar forecast from Walmart and Macy's early last week. Nordstrom shares fell $2.13, or 3.6%, to $57.20 per share, making it the second biggest decliner in the S&P 500. The retail industry is a closely watched part of the U.S. economy, as consumer spending makes up roughly 70% of economic activity. Disappointing outlooks are especially worrisome because they come during the back-to-school shopping season, typically the second biggest shopping period for U.S. retailers. The benchmark U.S. 10-year Treasury note rose to 2.85%, its highest level since July 2011. Late Thursday, the yield was 2.77%. Interest rates have been climbing sharply for the last 2 weeks as investors anticipate that the Federal Reserve will cut back on its big bond buying program as early as September. Banks, which typically benefit from higher interest rates, held on to gains from earlier in the day. The stock of Bank of America Corp rose 6 cents to $14.39. J.P. Morgan Chase & Company was up 7 cents to $53.36 per share. Also in focus were home builders, following a Commerce Department report that new home construction was up 6% in July to a seasonally adjusted rate of 896,000 units. That figure was below economists' consensus forecast of 903,000, however. Shares of Pulte Group Incorporated and Lenner Group were up 2%. Housing has been one of the bright spots of the U.S. economy for the past several months. As a matter of fact, in June, home builders sought the most building permits for single-family homes in 5 years. New home sales jumped in June to their highest level in 5 years. The last few weeks, investors have been concerned about what will happen to the stock market as well as the U.S. economy. Once the Fed begins winding down its $85 billion a month bond buying program, investors think that the Fed's program has been a large contributor to the stock market's to the stock market's record run. The Dow dropped more than 300 points, or roughly 3% last week. The S&P 500, which is a broader gauge of the market, is down almost 40 points, or 2%. The market is on pace for its third worst week this year. In other news, personal computer Dell maker Dell Incorporated reported a 72% drop in its fiscal second quarter earnings. That may help convince Dell shareholders to approve the $24.8 billion buyout proposed by founder Michael Dell and private equity firm Silver Lake. Shares of Dell rose 5 cents to $13.77 per share, below the proposed buyout price of $13.88 per share. And that concludes today's stock market report on First Cup. Well, what do you say we switch it over to the CBS World News Roundup and find out what's going on in the exciting world of planet Earth on this beautiful Monday morning.
Egyptian police attack.
The violence is spreading.
Olympic Blade Runner appears in court.
He has been charged with premeditated murder.
Recall effort grows against San Diego mayor.
He's a menace and he's a predator.
Good morning. I'm Steve Kathan with the CBS World News Roundup. Amid the chaos in Egypt, there's breaking news about the man who ruled the country for decades. His lawyer says former President Hosni Mubarak's been acquitted of corruption charges and could be released, but he faces other counts and prosecutors will look to keep him behind bars. Cairo is quiet after days of violence, but CBS's Alex Ortiz via Skype says 25 policemen were killed in an ambush in northern Sinai.
This is one of the deadliest attacks Egypt has seen in Sinai ever since the peninsula has become increasingly lawless over the past 2.5 years. Attacks against military and police targets are common there, but this death toll is particularly high.
This is Bill Plant at the White House. As the Obama administration struggles to find a response to the deadly unrest in Egypt, the State Department has begun taking steps to withhold economic aid. That's only a small portion, about $200 million of the $1.5 billion annually in U.S. aid to Egypt. The rest goes to the military.
More crews and equipment are being moved in to fight the wildfire that threatens Idaho resort communities Ketchum and Sun Valley. 2,300 homes have been evacuated by the fire that's blackened 160 square miles. CBS's John Blackstone is covering.
Firefighters will have a challenge again here today with temperatures in the 90s, low humidity, and winds gusting up to 25 miles an hour. With the fire threatening, many of the businesses here in Ketchum have closed during what is usually the height of the summer tourist season, and there are few tourists here for good reason.
The domestic partner of the journalist who got the NSA leaks from Edward Snowden was detained for nearly 9 hours at London's Heathrow Airport as he was returning home to Brazil. Guardian reporter Glenn Greenwald says officials did more than ask questions.
They took his laptop, his cell phone, his camera, DVDs, USB stick.
I'm Larry Miller in London. Glenn Greenwald says David Miranda's 9-hour detention and interrogation at Heathrow is an attempt to frighten journalists working on the Snowden story. British lawmaker Tom Watson agrees.
They're clearly trying to intimidate Glenn Greenwald, and that's an attack on journalism, and I think politics needs to intervene to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Brazil has issued a formal complaint saying Miranda's detention causes grave concern and was unjustified.
The athlete known as the Blade Runner was back in a South African court.
An emotional Oscar Pistorius spent most of that time in prayer, with his head bowed, holding the hands of his sister and his brother.
CBS's Deborah Pata in Pretoria says the double amputee sprinter was indicted for murder and the shooting death of his girlfriend.
He will spend the next 7 months preparing for this court case. He's got a lot of work to do there. It's unlikely that he's going to be doing any professional running or even training.
His trial has been set for next March. Now to San Diego, where Mayor Bob Filner, accused of inappropriate behavior with women, is apparently done with therapy. CBS's Steve Futterman on the growing effort now to make him an ex-mayor.
The city's embattled mayor says he will be back at work today.
When I return on August 19th, my focus will be on making sure that I am doing right by this city.
But there are many who would like him to stay away.
The citizens of San Diego have a message for you. It's time to resign.
Yesterday, hundreds attended a rally to kick off a recall campaign to get the mayor out.
He's a menace, and he's a predator, and he sexually harassed women.
Petitions are now being signed. Supporters of a recall must gather just over 100,000 signatures by September 26th.
We are the people. We can elect them, and we can throw them out.
Steve Futterman, CBS News, San Diego.
Bob Filner, out the door. We don't want you anymore.
San Francisco's fire chief has now banned helmet cams that take video of emergency scenes. It all follows the images that emerged after the Asiana Airlines crash landing, showing a fire truck running over a 16-year-old girl who died. Now to Washington, where lawmakers will soon confront a potential helium shortage. We're live in D.C. with CBS's Barry Bagnato.
Without helium, Stephen Colbert says he really sounds like this.
My apologies. Let me crank myself back up.
Ah, that's better.
The aerospace industry, welders and makers of flat-screen TVs, optical fibers, and semiconductors have much more serious problems if Congress doesn't quickly act to keep the federal helium reserve in Texas from abruptly closing in October, not to mention party supply shops. Legislation is needed to smoothly transfer the reserve to private control. Without it, already short supplies will fall off what's being called the helium cliff. Steve?
Well, first at the movies, then on Broadway, The Lion King has delighted young and old. Now, as CBS's Heather Bosch tells us, there's a special stage version for kids with autism.
It's great entertainment, but even family-friendly theater like The Lion King can be overwhelming for people with autism.
Previous shows that we had gone to, he hadn't made it through the whole thing.
Stephen Chakelson's son Daniel